The toolmaker's son thinks artificial intelligence is the answer. 2024 was an election year. The Tories could choose when it would happen, but it had to be an election. Well, Labour had a plan. They had a plan to answer no questions and promise change. This was a wise plan. The election was in the bag. It was theirs to lose. A lot of political pundits recalled Neil Kinnock's surprise loss to John Major, and I laughed as mainstream media commentators said the Tories pulled it out of the bag and rescued an election win. Could still happen? No, that's not what happened. And someone in Starmer's team knew it. John Major did not pull one out of the bag. Neil Kinnock and the Labour Party had a presidential celebration victory rally the night before the election. The British don't like that jubilancy. The leopard showed its spots and the people didn't like it. The Labour Party lost that election. The Conservatives definitely did not win that election. Well, Starmer wasn't going to make the same mistake, so there was a three-line whip on policies. There were vague suggestions for direction and the word change. This was hammered in and it worked. As it was a guaranteed election year, Labour, being the party of the opposition, had to be copied on everything. So they saw the memos, they saw the statistics, they had a very clear idea what was going on. They had months of seeing all the skeletons in the cupboards and knowing just as much as the Tories did. Then they came in and spirited a £22 billion black hole out of thin air. You can't see it, but it's real. And define it. It's always a £22 billion black hole, but 22 billion is a drop in the ocean of the money that we waste every year. There's no surprises. And if we need to tighten our belts so much, why was it the first thing they did was pay train drivers £80,000 a year? Because the unions told them to? During the election, Labour shadow ministers could not define a working man. Could you imagine a Labour Party who, instead of working class, say working people, and then can't define it? Well, the series of scandals about expenses shows that perhaps it is a separation from the realities of working class life which is the problem. I've never been working class, but I've always been close enough to have an appreciation of the challenges they face in their life. I've shared some of them. I've had a winter where I couldn't afford to put heater on. This rough appreciation of the challenges of working class life has always wanted me to have some Labour MPs in Parliament. I would not want a House of Commons without A, a meaningful opposition, and B, representation of those less fortunate. A sizable minority of people in the UK have a rough life. Times are hard. They struggle. Labour needs to provide the moral compass. I've spent most of my life a Conservative voter, and I want the left-wing perspective. I want those caring for the less fortunate. It disgusts me that I don't see this. Parliament represents the entire population, and it can only do this if it covers a breadth of experiences. I remember being invited by a very left-wing friend to a meeting of the Westminster Conservatives. Go figure. And a very well-dressed man in his early 30s talked with disgust of having to step over tramps. Why did my friend get an invite? Because he was very left-wing and he was also very rich. I want a parliament where someone cares about those people. The tramps, that is, not the very rich. There's always someone to care for them. That's the Labour Party I respect. So do the Cabinet understand a working man's challenges? Now, Starmer received £16,000 in clothes, £3,000 in glasses, £35,000 in football tickets, 17,000 racing and concerts. Well, working people don't see such things. In fact, their entire pre-tax salary doesn't pay for those things. They get a Christmas party if they're lucky. And let's face it, the reason we were all so curious, and the Labour Party apparatchiks were so willing to leak details of housing, was that it's curiously odd how Lord Ali received an unexplained pass to number 10. Who gets unfettered access to number 10? There are a lot of Labour MPs who would love one of those, but no, they don't get one. So what did he do? It's never been answered. The working class look forward to a retirement with a small pension and a winter fuel allowance, but Starmer took this away. Don't worry, there's a special Act of Parliament to ensure that Keir, and only Keir, doesn't lose out on his £1 million pension. When Parliament passes a special law just for you to make sure your pension is both gold-plated and bulletproofed, can you really relate to the fear many people feel in their 40s and 50s when they think, I'm looking forward to a glass half full? Well, Starmer has a cornucopia, a bacchanalian feast as opposed to gruel and water. This is like something out of Dickens in the modern day. As Starmer said, you cannot be a lawbreaker and a lawmaker unless you're in his cabinet. Well, his transport minister made a false police report on her phone theft, so she'd get a new phone. I find this crime bizarre, and even more so, what sort of person reports a theft to the police like they aren't busy enough arresting people for non-hate crime incidents, accepts a replacement through a fraudulent declaration to her employer, and then calls her mum on that phone? Criminally stupid is how I'd describe that crime. Yet she was a union girl, had charisma, was mouthy, so straight to the cabinet for her. I actually thought she had a bit of charisma and potential and a future. We have the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who balanced moaning about the £22 billion black hole she'd known about all along, if it even existed, with doling out billions to Labour's union friends in the first week of her government. Well, don't worry, we'll claw it back by accepting the first piece of advice from the civil servants. Take that money from the pensioners. The party which said the Tories would kill 4,700 by taking away the winter fuel allowance used this as an accusation and then a blueprint. Either they lied when they said the Tories were going to kill 4,700 people, or they just didn't care. Either way, that's not the Labour Party I've always respected. Then she had her budget, having put it off for months to craft her masterpiece. After all, she was an economist, a safe pair of hands, an expert. Yet her budget has stalled the economy, scared the markets, and helped unveil the sordid little secret behind the economist's experience. The economist with years of experience at the State Bank had actually been a trainee there for 2 years, and then chose to work at the help desk at a retail bank instead. Not the image presented to the public, and frankly, after 6 months, it looks like an aspiring theoretical economist playing at the game of running the economy. Cosplay with our money. Then you have Tulip, the corruption minister. Well, will she resign before I even get to post this video? She's a dead man walking, and reporting herself for a minor mistake will not cover up the accusation that she's involved in a £4 billion embezzlement as part of her aunt's £14 billion grift scheme. As I said earlier, We need MPs who think of the poor and less fortunate. She had a great human rights record, but there are serious questions over funding housing and gifts from those who did well out of a regime which ruled Bangladesh with an iron fist and disappeared thousands of opponents. Last time I checked, that's a human rights abuse. But she has Starmer's full support. Now, I'm not suggesting she's guilty of any of these things she's accused of, but just the optics alone expose her. She's another millstone around Starmer's neck. Why would he not cut her immediately? Tony Blair showed the door to his closest allies, and over the years they were rehabilitated. I mean, Starmer should know this. Remember Peter Mandelson, he's just appointed him as US ambassador. Well, first time around, December 1998, he had to resign as Trade and Industry Secretary after revelations of an undisclosed home loan from the Paymaster General. I mean, that has echoes of the current administration. And then he had to resign temporarily when he was accused of helping an Indian billionaire secure a British passport. Now, this shows that someone who didn't do something could be rehabilitated without damaging the government. Well, after 6 months, there are serious questions about the Chancellor, the ex-Transport Minister, and the Corruption Minister. There are serious questions over the slum landlord who sits on his benches having ignored the rules he helped write. His tenants sit in mould, but there's no pressure to do the right thing. Perhaps there will be when Politico publishes their next piece on him. Now, there's no loss of the whip without public explanation. A foreign secretary who's been a laughingstock for over a decade. So who will shine next? I predict the education secretary. When the impact of taxing private schools on state schools is laid bare, a policy driven by politics and envy, not economics or concern for education, people will start to ask, why didn't we plan this through? What did we gain from this? Did it cost more than it gained us? Did it damage children's lives? Did no one think, how are we going to provide them with school places in normal schools? No, they just thought 20% equals £10,000. £10,000 equals lots of money. But when they don't go to private school and they go to a normal state school, how much does it cost to put that child through school? Well, clearly a number they didn't run through the calculator. There's talk of austerity. Well, Starmer should do well here. When he was Director of Public Prosecutions, not the rather odd title of Chief Prosecutor which he likes to give himself, he did it very well. The man who loves to decry austerity met his targets. I saw a fascinating interview with one of his team who said Starmer hit the target ahead of time. I often wonder how Starmer got where he did, and maybe the answer is he's a good middle manager who's good at telling people to do what he's been told they need to do. Execute orders without consideration or empathy. Well, he was just following orders. When he got rid of all those experienced prosecutors, the Tories must have loved him. When everyone was finding excuses not to reduce their budget, he just got out a red pen and delivered. No wonder a Tory Parliament passed a law just for him in his name to make sure their thanks for his work were eternal. As talk of austerity grows, the Labour Cabinet sit down to discuss using AI to turn the country around. When we had Dutch elm disease, we didn't plant plastic trees. We cut down the sick trees. But when the sick trees in the metaphor are your own cabinet, you can hardly expect them to vote for the solution. So the son of a toolmaker can't build a cabinet. He can turn to artificial intelligence. It's a tool. Which reduces the need for people. Maybe the robotic politician has been watching Terminator 2, but who did he empathise with? Politicians love to turn to technology to look smart and hip. Think of Kamala Harris's rather long explanation of how the cloud works, or Rishi Sunak's love of AI. You look for a silver bullet when your problems are intractable.